Right. Well, for whoever just clicked on this or in for future clicks, if you're watching it, or if you're watching it live, or if you're watching it on the catch-up, if you want to just click a like or make a comment, so I know it's being used. It's running now because I said 8:40, but we've just lost someone. So when he comes back, we'll carry on. As I said in the post earlier, this is probably going to be in 2 parts. We'll probably have a quarter of an hour break for Pete and fags and bits and pieces. A little bit in about halfway through everything. Yeah. So yeah. So we'll just start in a minute. So.
Taylor's spamming a lot of love.
Right.
Trying to crunch and scratching for
Sorry.
you do it.
I'm back again.
Well, hello to whoever's joined us online. Right, this is a talk I did some 14 years ago, the first time, and it's been updated a little bit. So it's runes in general. Right, as with most talks, given this is intended to be a very brief introduction to rune lore, which I hope will pique an interest and hopefully will lead to you to further your own studies. I'd like to start with this talk with a piece of information that will not sit well with some people. Historically, there is no evidence of the runes being used for divination. The whole modern idea that this is the case comes from the passage in Germania 10 written by the Roman Tacitus in the 1st century AD. This reads, "For divination and the casting of lots they have the highest regard. Their procedure in casting lots is always the same. They cut off a branch of a nut-bearing tree and slice it into strips. These they mark with different signs and throw them completely at random onto a white cloth. Then, the priest of the state, if the consultation is a public one, or the father of the family, if it is private, offers a prayer to the gods, and looking up at the sky picks up 3 strips, one at a time, and reads their meaning from the signs previously scored on them. If the lots forbid an enterprise, there is no deliberation that day on the matter in question. If they allow it, confirmation by taking of auspices is required. Whereas it does mention signs being marked, we do not know what these marks could have been. It is only conjecture that they are the runes we know." So, basically, all modern rune divination bits and pieces has been taken from that one passage from a 2,000-year-old Roman.
And given that we know that we've gone from the elder Futhark to the younger Futhark, so that shows that runic system has changed.
Well, yes.
Then you've got a long period of time for it to have changed prior to that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Whereas it doesn't. Oh, I'd say that. However, as divination relies heavily on the interpretation of the seer, and is a way for the seer to access the knowledge they seek, a modern tradition of using runes in such a way is valid. It is only the claim that divination with the runes has been performed since 0 CE that I want to question. Right, a bit of history. The word rune comes from the Germanic word runa, meaning a secret thing or a mystery. In the most exoteric historical sense, the runes represent an alphabet used in an unbroken tradition by the Germanic peoples from ancient times to as late as the early 20th century in remote areas of Scandinavia. This continuous tradition went through many transformations, however. It is important to realise that the runes, although a system of symbols, a meta-language, do not constitute a language in the usual sense. Any natural language, English, Russian, Japanese, etc., theoretically could be written in rune staves, though historically the runes were never employed outside the Germanic group of languages. They were never used by the Gaelic nations or the Finns. The oldest runic tradition is that of the 24 stave or elder Futhark. If you're looking at the PDF, that's image 1 on the first page. That's this. I do apologise, even though I've been using this image for 14 years, this is the first time I've noticed that Rune on the top right is wrong. Roger. It should look like a P.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that one is wrong. This system may have begun as early as 200 BCE, but certainly was in use by the 1st century CE. The oldest inscription found to date is the Meldorf fibula, that's image 2, which dates from around 50 CE. In Scandinavia, this system continued in an unbroken stream till around 800 CE, when it was systematically reformed into the 16-stave or younger futhark. That's image 3. Is that right? Some communities where the runes are used in daily life have taken the earliest runes of the Elder Futhark as about 250 BCE and use their own calendar where the date is used at the start of the modern era. Therefore, this year would be known as 2272 RE or Runic era. Within the time frame of the Elder Futhark, beginning as early as 450 CE, an extended 33-stave Futhark was developed in Frisian and Anglo-Saxon territories. So, with one year correct on that one. That's the next image. This system continued to be extended and extensively represented in more diverse media in manuscripts, until around 1050 CE. Also, within the formal tradition of 24-stave Futhark was the South Germanic runic tradition, which flourished in the 6th and 7th century CE, especially in Bavaria, Alemannia, and Thuringia. The younger Futhark itself was subdivided into image 5, the long branch runes, the short twig or rock runes, and the Halsinga or staveless runes. In Scandinavia, the 16-stave Futhark system, which had begun at the dawn of the Viking Age, was slowly being corrupted by the Southern European alphabetic system. The rune staves were taken out of their distinctive Futhark order and put into the alphabetic one, with 3 systems known as the Marcomannic runes, image 6, the medieval runes, image 7, and the Dalecarlian runes, image 8. This alphabetic reform was more or less complete for most esoteric purposes around 1300 CE. However, the rune poems show that the esoteric tradition of the Futhark order survived into the 15th century. Knowledge of the rune staves as a writing system all but died out everywhere except in Scandinavia, where it continued to be an alternative utilitarian script, especially for carvings amongst clerics, merchants and farmers. Eventually, rune law was only preserved in the most remote interior of Scandinavia. Right. In more recent times, an additional rune stave called the Armanen runes has been developed. This chapter here, in Armanen. The Armanen rune Futhark is the creation of poet, writer and artist Guido von List, who, during an 11-month-long period of blindness following a cataract operation in 1902, said he received a vision giving him the meanings of the runes based on the stanzas 147 through 165 of the Poetic Edda. This smaller Futhark of 18 runes is an amalgam of the Elder Futhark, the Younger Futhark, and one rune Gifu that he created himself. Or Gibor, as it is on that. What's it? Bit of a Guido. He came up with this. The Gibor or Gifu rune that he used, the last rune, is based on a Germanic symbol called the wolf's hook. It's used on. It's completely gone out of my head. It's used on flags. It's used on coats of arms and bits and pieces. It's basically based on literally a wolf's hook. It was a device used to catch wolves in the Black Forest. where they put meat on the hook and it'll jump up and his jaws will get stuck on the thing itself. If you are interested in having a bit of a read of Guido's stuff, you can pick this up from the speaking tree. There's lots of books on runes, but they said this is just about the almond runes. This is his book. It's translated by Stephen Flowers, who's better known as Edwin Thorson. But unfortunately, Guido went on to join the Thor Society and was part of the esoteric branch of the naughty people, the Nazis. But it's there. I've got it for just. I felt I had to read it.
But it's part of it. I mean, it's part of history. You just can't,
Exactly.
can't
But
ignore it because of what he went on to do.
But yeah, this guy was like literally he went blind for 11 months and he was shown visions, and he just made it all up himself. And the stanzas are worth reading anyway because it explains where it comes from. During the 1930s, Professor Sigurd Agnew noted that a cipher was used by Teutonic rune magicians when writing, where the rune roll shifted one place, so the layman could not read his works. He hypothesised that the rune rolls, when written down, were given by these magicians and therefore would have had a cipher applied to the entire Futhark. This gives us the Uthark theory, which has been explored recently, in more recent years. I would say this is 14 years old. In more recent years, by Thomas Carlson in his book Night Side of the Runes. There's no real evidence for this, but the exercise in exploring the hypothesis is a compelling read. Night Side of the Runes is a great book. Up until recently, it was only available mass produced in German, but Night Side of the Runes can be picked up from, I think it was the speaking tree actually when I went in the other day. So. As the runes of the Elder Futhark are broken down into 3/8 of 8 runes, and advanced study in the runes look at the relationship between the runes and their positions within the 8s, and the Uthark theory adds a huge spanner to the workings of these rune scholars. The most public use of the rune forms would have to be by the Nazi Party in the 1930s and 40s. This image, you probably note the difference in the Othala rune with the two legs. Mm-hmm. It's very specific to the the far right. This is the thing that pointed out to me that the woman in front of me at Clun on Monday was part of the far right because she had dirty earrings and she had the Nazi Odell on them, and he was just like, no, keep away from me. This use has sullied the use of the runes for modern practitioners in the eyes of many people who see them as evil because of their historic connotations. To compound this problem, modern neo-Nazi groups continue to use these insignia. It is a shame that this has happened, but it is my hope that the proper history and the facts behind the runes are made more public and they're used in a positive way. They're used by these exhausts. We hope that the use by these organisations will be seen as a historic anomaly. It's not looking that way. It looks like we've lost quite a lot. Finally, around 1990, a gentleman called Ralph Blum wrote a book called The Book of Runes. This little gem. That's image 11. In which he introduced the 25th rune that he called the blank rune. This rune is ignored by most modern rune practitioners as its inclusion is dated only from the 1970s. There is one publication that talks about the blank rune before Blum, but his is the most widely known. I've heard a few versions for how this rune came to be, and the one I've heard the most, and it comes from a reasonably respected source, was this. To create a set of runes, his little clay runes there, which he gave away with the book, he went to a company which pressed out forms out of clay, the material used to produce the 24 runes in the Elder Futhark. The press needed would have to be in 4 rows of 6 or 3 rows of 8. He was informed that the cheapest way to do it was to have 5 rows of 5. so we had one spare. To remove the blank rune would have cost him quite a lot, so we decided just to leave it in, and he made a meaning up for it. So if you get a rune set with the blank rune, the decision is the decision to use it is your own, but most people just use it as a spare. Because the tradition of the blank rune is only 40 or so years old. Right, image 12. Right, next image. On an esoteric level, the runes were given to Odin after he performed an act of sacrifice by hanging himself on Yggdrasil, the world tree, for 9 nights with no sustenance, as written in the Havamel, translated as the same as the High One, a text found in its oldest form in the 13th century book, the Codex Regis. This states, I know I was hanged on the windy tree 9 full nights, stabbed by a spear, offered to Odin, sworn to myself, upon that tree that no man knows from what roots it rises. No bread did they bear me, nor horn-handed. Into the deep I gazed, I took up the runes, then fell back again screaming. That's Havamel stanzas 138 to 139 of the Poetic Edda. Odin then returned to his people and taught them the secrets of how to make them and how to use them. Again, the Havamel reads, Knowest how one shall carve them, knowest how one shall read them, knowest how one shall colour them, knowest how one shall test them, knowest how one shall ask them, knowing how one shall offer them, knowest how one shall send them, and knowest how one shall sacrifice, which is the Havamel stanza 145 in the Poetic Edda. From this it can be seen that there are 8 fields of knowledge to be learnt to master the runes. To carve them, literally how to make a set of runes, or to carve in magical uses. To read them, not just what letter they are, but the inner meanings of each. To colour them, to stain the runes, it's usually red, to activate them. To test them, basically practice makes perfect. To ask them, during magical works you ask for the corresponding god to aid you in your work, as with all magic. The rune magician must learn which to ask, but caution is advised following the above stanzas. The next reads, Better is not to ask than to offer too much. Gift demands gift in return, or there's always a price. To offer them, the price, ranging from a ceremony, therefore allotting time to practice, to dedicating an item or space to the gods. To send them, the modern term is creative visualization, where you create a thought form of the rune or sigil and send it to the gods. As it leaves your mind, you activate the intent. And to sacrifice them, to learn how to give yourself fully to workings. Next image, image 13. Images of Odin's sacrifice to acquire the knowledge of the runes can be seen today in the tarot card The Hanged Man, which pertains to the acquisition of knowledge. And the link between the two can be seen in that the traditional position of the Hanged Man imitates the rune Nauthiz, whose meaning suggests being bound. The meanings we are given in most modern books on the subject have been gleaned from 3 sources, which are the Anglo-Saxon, Norwegian and Icelandic rune poems. The stanzas in each of these poems describe each rune. For example, for the first rune, Fehu, the rune poems read, the Anglo-Saxon reads, Wealth be all very much welcomed, each man shall deal it out freely, if he will, from the Lord, get approval. The Norwegian poem says, Wealth causes trouble amongst relatives, the wolf is raised in the forest. And the Icelandic poem says, Wealth is trouble amongst relatives, and fire of the sea and path of the serpent. It can be seen that the basic meaning would be wealth. Deeper meanings would be gleaned from meditation on each of the verses. The runes themselves can be made from various different materials and in different forms. Examples of this would be image 14, lots. These can be made from multitude of materials, including clay, wood, antler, bone, and in various shapes depending on how they are made, but the most common is a circular wooden disc made from a cross-section of branch with the rune form marked onto the surface. Image 15, stones. Literally a small stone, either river, sea, rounded pebble or tumbled semi-precious stone of choice. The rune form then painted onto or engraved into the surface. Image 16 is tines. These are strips of wood about as thick as the little finger with the tip cut at an angle, and the rune form is then marked onto this surface. Image 17, dice. Can be made from any material with the rune forms marked onto the faces. Never figured out how to read them properly. And 18 is image 18 is the cards. Each rune has a different card with an image showing its meaning. Lots and stones can be either withdrawn individually for a pattern layout or cast onto a white sheet and the meaning interpreted from the arrangement made. Tines are cast onto a white sheet and interpreted. Dice will be rolled as a normal die would be, and the result read as a pattern layout, and cards are used much in the same way as tarot cards. Image 19. So again, back to the first one. For this talk, I will concentrate on the Elder Futhark of 24 runes. The Futhark, like the alphabet, is named after its initial letters. Alpha Beta being the start of the alphabet, therefore, for the Futhark, these are Futhark. The Elder Futhark is split into three lots of 8 runes called eights. Each 8 is named after the god that the starting rune represents. These are commonly known to be Freya's 8, Hagel's 8, or Heimdall's 8, and Tyr's 8. As I said previously, the relationship between the positions of the runes within these 8s is a topic of advanced study, either in the 3 rows of 8 or when placed in a circle. An example of this is that when you look at the circle, go on to the next image, there are 3 main celebrations: Yule, Ostara and Litha. Right. Given that Yule is the turning of the year, and you can associate this with the term Yela, with Yela meaning year. When you look at the one, I'm going to say, given that Yule is the turning of the year, and you can associate this with the rune Yela meaning year, if you draw a line across from it to its opposite, you get Dag as the rune for day, with Litha being the longest day. This seems to work. This, of course, can be purely coincidental, but if you then look at the midpoint between the 2 runes, theoretically you should correspond with Ostara, and you get Bacana, the rune for fertility and birth. I was actually looking at this a little bit more, and if you can actually continue it around, and there are sort of, it's not as obvious as that, but there are other correspondences. So what you get between,
Would make that I would call the K be Sarwin then.
and I said, where are we? Sarwin would be no, because it's opposite Ostara, which would be Mabon. Mabon September, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, say for September. I mean, it would be good if it was Sarwin, because it'd be a fire festival. So
yeah.
that
was what I was getting excited.
Yeah. So Lamas would be Thurs. Mabon is Kenaz. Where are we? Sarwin is Hagalaz. Imolc would be the Algies, and Beltane would be Lagos. For some reason I must have been looking at the wrong ones when I was looking at it, because I thought it did work. But that is quite, that one worked quite well. If you look at, there's a, just as an aside, the 3 Wardruna albums are based on this. That if you started a rune and go 9 runes round and follow it around, you get the order of the tracks on each. Wardruna album. So obviously, the first one starts with Bacana, and so you go 9 around. Second one, 5 go 9 around, and that's how they came up with the order of the tracks on the 3 albums.
Oh wow.
Right. Okay. Next section is Rune, which is I'm just seeing if I need to what's it right onto this bit. Rune is the term used when runes are cast for divinatory purposes. As I explained earlier, it is a modern tradition. It's a modern word for a modern tradition, basically. When casting runes, certain choices have to be made. Firstly, a personal choice of how you will draw the runes themselves is required. You can draw the rune and place it in front of you, and then draw another, and so on. Or you can draw the rune and write it down in its correct position, where it is in the spread, and replace it back into its container, so it can be drawn again if that's appropriate. Then you draw another rune and put it back, and so on. Personally, I use this latter because I believe that the same rune can appear in multiple times in a single spread, and if it's not in the container, this is impossible. For example, in a 2-rune spread where the first indicates the visible appearance of the situation and the second indicates what is underneath influencing matters, if you draw the following: firstly, draw Uruz in its upright position, and then you put it back and you draw Uruz again in its inverted position, this would imply that you are facing a challenge in your life which you must overcome, which is Rune 1, but you are being impeded by a fear of failure, Rune 2. This spread would have been impossible to do if you hadn't replaced the rune each time. But as I said, it's a personal choice which form you use. And as I said, it's a modern tradition. We're all coming up with our own UPG and MTs anyway, so it's as valid as anybody's. Secondly, you need to examine what the question being asked is and make a choice of rune spread to use. These spreads, examples of these spreads I'm going to show a bit later. Now you must decide what preparation you believe you require for the casting. Do you protect yourself and ask for aid from the divinity, or do you just cast without formalities, relying on your own talents? If you decide that you want assistance from a higher source to do something along the lines of the following: get comfortable in a suitable location where you won't be disturbed, cast a circle of protection to whichever way you use suits you personally, call upon divinity for assistance. I've got 2 verses which are an example. The gods used to reflect the Norse pantheon. The gods used to reflect the Norse pantheon, which makes sense for a rune reading. You can either call the gods, goddesses, or both. Once again, it's a personal choice. So this is something I used to. I said, all hail the Aesir, hail to Odin, Lord of divination. From your sacrifice we gain knowledge of the runes. I humbly ask you for your presence in this sanctified space, so I may share your knowledge to aid me in finding the truths before me. Was hail, and for the goddesses, all hail the Aesir, hail to Freya, queen of all witchcrafts. I humbly continue with what I said before. Finally, before you start, you must sense your concentration on the question situation that is the reason for the casting. These days, I tend to just focus on the question. Focus on the question, put my hand in the bag, root around till I find one that feels right, and pull it out. Keep my eyes closed and look at it. If it's upside down, I turn it away from myself. When I say upside down, if it's on the blank side, turn it away from myself, so whichever way it comes up. And it's just, I've just got down to that now. I used to do a lot more. 3 candles and bowls and all. No more. Right. Possible examples of spreads. That's image 21. You draw 1 rune, place it in front of you, the way up that you first saw the rune, and this could be, it indicates an overview of the situation, a simple answer to a direct question, either a simple yes or no, whether it's upright or inverted, the rune itself, or as its divinatory meaning. It can be drawn as an additional rune if a more complicated spread is confusing, to show an overview of the situation. And it can be drawn at the start of the day to indicate what the day holds. This is something that the first book I read said it's good to do to get to know the runes. Just draw 1 rune every day and just keep reading up its meanings until you learn what the meanings are. Next one. Draw 3 runes.
It can't be ours.
Can't be asked.
Image 22. Draw 3 runes in In the style you have chosen for the above introduction, always read the runes in the order they have been drawn, alphabetically as indicated. A represents an overview of the situation, B represents the challenge to overcome, and C would represent the action required to overcome the situation. Image 23. This I saw as the three Norns rune casting. Named after three Norns in Norse mythology, Erd, Verdandi and Skald. It is used to get an overview of the situation problem question. A is the stead of Erd, representing what the root of the matter and what is in the past. B is the stead of Verdandi, represents the present situation, what is happening now. And C would be the stead of Skald, represents a future outcome of the matter in hand. And then the 5 runes is the... change the image. The 5 runes on image 24, which is the 3 lifetime spread. This is used to divine an overview of the querent's past, present and future lives. You draw 5 runes. A represents birth and childhood, B the present, C the future of this life, D an overview of the querent's past life incarnation, and E is an overview of the querent's next life incarnation. This is entirely down to your own personal, how you want to do it, basically. They're just a few bits and pieces to, just some examples, basically. Right, there is a little bit more. Can you stop it? We'll stop it there, be 15 minutes, be back at 9:30.
Just finish,
Yeah, and